It's a great honor to have Bill McDonough back with us.
Hi, everybody. I don't know how you follow all these people. And I'm a man. Well, thanks. I'll do my best. I'm also a designer, and today I just want to talk briefly about the concept of design itself, because I think that design is the first signal of human intention. And as we look around today at the tragedies that we see in the making, we realize that we have to question, do we really intend for this to happen? Is this something we designed? And we should probably look at some retroactive design assignments and realize that perhaps it's time for some new ones. I'm going to ask you to join me as a designer so that I'm going to present the problems we're working with and ask you to help me solve them so you can see what we have to deal with every day. But I can tell you this. There are two fundamental questions we find ourselves asking ourselves over and over again while we're designing, and they are these. How do we love all of the children of all species for all time? And you notice this is not how do we love our children. This is all of the children, all of the species for all time. And the other question is one that I think Wes Jackson has so eloquently asked, and that we've heard about in the last two talks as well. And that is the question, when do we become native to this place? When do we all become indigenous people? How many people here consider themselves indigenous people? Not that many. You know, I was at the Hanford nuclear plant where they make the plutonium for the bombs. And they had some scientists there discussing the question of how to mark the ground where they buried the plutonium such that an extraterrestrial arriving 5,000 years from now wouldn't dare to dig. I call it the semiology of extreme danger. And it's an astonishing design problem, can you imagine? But what is also interesting, that the native peoples, the Yakima, were there for another meeting, and they bumped into the scientists during the breakout session, and when they found out what they were doing, they started to laugh. And they said, you know, you really don't need to worry about this. We'll tell them where it is. They weren't leaving. Why is it we're always leaving? What we realize is that if these tragedies that we see happening in the world of plutonium, global warming, persistent toxification, endocrine disruption, if we start to realize that we have to love all of children of all species for all time, why is it that in Germany today no mother's milk would be legal to sell on a store shelf? How do you love all the children if you toxify the mother's milk? And so we need to look at these tragedies and realize that if we're designers, we have to take responsibility. And you can't say it's not part of your plan that these things are going to happen, because it's part of your de facto plan. It's the thing that's happening because you have no plan. And you know, planning is most effective when it's practiced in advance. And so what we realize is that these tragedies, we own these tragedies. We might as well have intended for them to occur. And essentially what we've done is become strategically tragic. And then once you realize that our culture has adopted strategies of tragedy, perhaps it's time to have strategies of change. And I think one of the great things about the strategies of change is there's great humility in this. We don't know what to do. Obviously, we have great traditions that we can go back to study different peoples, indigenous peoples. But we don't know what to do. And if anybody here has any problem with the concept of design humility, reflect on the fact that it took us 5,000 years to put wheels on our luggage. How smart are humans? Now, if we look at this idea of strategy, we can go back in this Western culture to Thomas Jefferson. Now, I was the dean at the University of Virginia, and as such, I had the great privilege of living in a house designed by Thomas Jefferson. Now, if you spent 5 years living in a house designed by Jefferson, you think of Jefferson as your architect. He clearly was my designer, and I thought about him, and I'd say he was a pretty good architect. You know, a few other things on his mind, but he was doing pretty well. And he also obviously saw himself as a designer first, because you just go up to see his home and his tombstone, which he designed, and on it you'll notice it records only those things he designed. It says Thomas Jefferson, author of the Declaration of American Independence, author of the Statute of Virginia for Religious Freedom, which matured into the Bill of Rights, and father of the University of Virginia. Notice he's only recording his legacies, not his activities. There is absolutely no mention of having been president of the United States twice. When the Exxon Valdez goes down in Prince William Sound, the GDP measurements of Alaska go up because there are so many people there cleaning up. What are we measuring? We're measuring activity, not legacy. This is not design. If we look at the Declaration of Independence as a design, imagine this 33-year-old Virginian sitting there in the morning, every morning, getting up to do his work, thinking, oh man, I gotta go work on that stupid Declaration of Independence. I mean, imagine that's your design assignment that you gave yourself. Think of it. Well, what is the design assignment of the Declaration of Independence? Could you call with a document for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, free from remote tyranny? Now imagine racking your brain for those three things that you would hold on to most fiercely, that you would become a revolutionary. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. Did anybody hear George Bush or Al Gore talk about happiness? So what we realize is this idea of freedom from remote tyranny caused them to become revolutionaries. Washington, Madison, Monroe, Jefferson, all within 60 miles of each other, woke up every morning planning sedition. I think it's time for a new revolution. If we look at the Declaration of Independence as a design, we realize that Jefferson and Franklin and Founding Fathers were very aware of the Iroquois Nation and their confederacy, and they must have been aware. We know that Franklin spoke Mohawk, for example. If we look at the tradition there and we realize that the great peacemaker instructed the chiefs to make all decisions on behalf of their seventh generation, Orrin Lyons tells me people forget the second half of the instruction, which is even if it requires you to have skin as thick as the bark of a pine. This means don't eat your seed corn. Thank you, Kenny. And what we realize is that Jefferson clearly understood this too. When he designed the federal government, another one of his small projects, he was looking at the idea of the federal bonding authority and what its terms should be. And he decided that a federal bond should have a life of one generation. And this was his logic to Madison in a letter in 1789. He wrote, "The earth belongs to the living. No man may by natural right oblige the lands he owns or occupies to debts greater than those that may be paid during his own lifetime. Because if he could, then the world would belong to the dead." 1789. If we look at his other design, the Bill of Rights, we can recognize, as Rachel Carson did, that none of the Founding Fathers would have expected that they would allow anybody to put toxins in a river or pollute the air or destroy children's health, because they would never imagine we would do such a thing. And as we look at the Bill of Rights today, when I walk into a carpet manufacturer and I say, "You have 16 known carcinogens in your product," and they say, "It's not against the law." Where are we here? If Jefferson were to return today, he'd be calling for a Bill of Responsibilities. The idea that we have a full range of legal conditions which allow people to do these things is insane from a design perspective. Let me point out that Jane Jacobs has said that the humans have evolved two syndromes for survival, what she calls the guardian and what she calls commerce. Guardian is the state, it's the university, it's the Knights of the Round Table and so on. Commerce is business. And the characteristics are completely different. The guardian is very slow, it's very serious, it wants to preserve the public weal, it reserves the right to kill, it will send rockets to Afghanistan, troops to the Gulf, it reserves the right to be duplicitous, the CIA is legal, and it shuns commerce As a dean, if you came to me and said, I'll give you $1 million to put my kid in your school, I would say, I can't have this conversation. This is why everybody wonders what they talk about over coffee in the Lincoln bedroom. And then commerce, on the other hand, is quite different. Commerce is very quick, it's very inventive, and it's honest, because you can't do business with someone very long unless you're honest. And so these two conditions are fundamentally different. And what she says is when you put the two together, you get what she calls a monstrous hybrid. If you put commerce into the Guardian, you corrupt it. If you put the Guardian into commerce, you slow it down. What is a regulation? A regulation from a design perspective is a pure signal of design failure. It's the Guardian stepping in and saying, wait a minute, you want to put chromium in this river or cadmium and pollute and kill children's brains downstream? We never gave you the right to kill. We reserve that to ourselves. We'll tell you at what rate you could dispense death. From a design perspective, a regulation is a signal of design failure. What do we call somebody who's trying to beat a regulation and is not being punished? What do we say? The words betray the act itself. We say they are getting away with murder. Indeed. His third design, the University of Virginia, is still there. He got a lot of complaints from the state legislature that his 10 professors in these houses, one of which I was living in, were always arguing with each other. They didn't understand that. He said, in revolutionary times and in education, we require the fierce clash of ideas. Well, if we look at this idea coming out of the Enlightenment of natural rights, then we also at this point in our history have to have a new enlightenment, which is the rights of nature. And if we look at the tradition of rights, as Jefferson did of Anglo-Saxons, it was noble males. Then in his Declaration of Independence, 1776, white, landowning Protestant males of a certain age, only 6% of the population. Emancipation, then suffrage, welcome aboard ladies, 1922. Native Americans vote, 1923. Civil Rights Acts of the 60s. And then in 1973, the first time human beings gave something other than human the right to even exist with the Endangered Species Act. Well, if we look around today, we realize that the question now is the rights of nature and the endangered ecosystems. Look what's going on at the Everglades. And so we need to understand what nature is. And in 1838, Emerson engaged this question before, just at the cusp of the first industrial revolution. And his question at Harvard was, if humans are natural, are therefore all things done by humans part of nature? And his conclusion is that nature is those things that are immutable, what he called the unchangeable essences, the things were too big for humans to affect. And his examples were the oceans, the mountains, and the leaves. Well, I think we now understand that we can't affect these things and that the whole concept of away has gone away. Remember, you used to be able to throw things away? Away has gone away, and so we need a new design. Well, what is design? In 1831, Emerson's wife died, and he went to Europe on a sailboat, and he returned in a steamship. If we abstract this for effect, he went over on a solar-powered, recyclable craft operated by craftspeople practicing ancient arts in the open air, and returned in a steel rust bucket, putting smoke in the sky, oil on the water, operated by people working in the darkness, shoveling fossil fuels into the mouths of boilers. The terrifying thing is that we're still designing steamships. We are here, the sun is shining gloriously outside, and we are here in the dark shoveling fossil fuels into the mouths of boilers and creating nuclear isotopes so we can sit here and talk about global warming and nuclear isotopes. We need a new design. It's what I call the boat for Thoreau, which is ironic because all sustainability, like politics, is local. And Thoreau didn't travel very much. When he was asked why he didn't travel much, he said, "What do you mean? I have traveled very widely and conquered." All sustainability will be local. Well, who's going to do this then? If we can talk about ships and we can talk about leaders, we can talk about leadership, well, who's going to lead? You are. Peter Senge at the Sloan School of Management tells the CEOs that come in for the learning laboratory, who is the leader on a ship crossing the ocean? And the answers he gets are captain, navigator, and so on. He says, no, it's the designer of the ship, because you could be the best captain in the world, but if the ship isn't designed to be seaworthy, you're going down. We need a new design. Designers must become leaders. Leaders must become designers. Let me give you a little background on me quickly, and then I'll show you some work. I was born in 1951 in Tokyo, Japan. I grew up in Hong Kong. And when I was a little kid, my mother would take me to the money changers to change my dad's paycheck, and I would be at eye level with a woman, an 80-year-old woman, holding a dying or dead baby for begging sympathy. And this is what happens when you have 6 million people on 40 square miles with no water. And I thought this was ordinary life. During the rainy season, we would lose whole hillsides of our people. During the dry season, we'd have 4 hours of water every 4th day. People died of cholera on our doorstep. I thought this was ordinary life. I spent my summers in the Puget Sound. My grandfather had been a lumberjack on the Olympic Peninsula cutting down the old growth. And he and some friends won the Yukon lottery, and he went out and bought 1,000 acres of old growth and built a log cabin and settled there with my grandmother, raised oysters, traded raspberries for flowers with their neighbors, composted, put things away for the winter. And I thought that was ordinary life. This incredible abundance. And then in the early 60s, my father became the president of Seagram overseas, the international wines and spirits business. We moved to New York when they built the Seagram building. And I lived in Westport, Connecticut, the 3rd richest town in America, where 16-year-olds had Porsches. And I thought that was ordinary life. I didn't get to do that. I had to drive a hardware truck because my dad was a Depression baby. Thanks, Dad. Then I went to Dartmouth College, and then I went to Yale, and while I was at Yale Architecture School, I built the first solar heated house in Ireland. That should give you a sense of my ambition. There is no sun in Ireland. And then in the early 80s, I was asked by Environmental Defense Fund to do their national headquarters, and Fred Krupp, their executive director, at the end of the contract negotiation said, by the way, if anybody in our office gets sick from indoor air quality, we're going to sue you. So I spoke to our attorneys, and I said, what does this really mean? And he said, it's called negligence. And I said, well, explain it to me. He said, well, it means that you know better and you do it anyway. And I said, oh, great. Well, we have no problem. We don't know anything. And neither does anybody else, apparently, because we went around and there were a couple of people out there, one guy in Colorado, one guy in Connecticut, who were even looking at this. And what we realized is that nobody knew anything. And we started calling manufacturers and saying, what's in your glues? What's in your carpets? What's in your particle boards? And they all said, oh, it's proprietary. It's legal. Go away. Well, we're still at it. We now work with about $500 billion worth of companies. We're asking the same questions. In 1987, I was asked by members of the Jewish community in New York to design a memorial of the Holocaust at Auschwitz, a place for the Jews to pray. There was a convent that the Pope wouldn't help get removed, and they wanted an alternative proposal. I went to Birkenau and Auschwitz, and I stood in the center of Birkenau camp, which is 1 mile in diameter, 3 miles in circumference, and I realized that engineers and architects had come together to design a giant killing machine. If design is the first signal of human intention, this was the signal of the worst of human intention. And I thought to myself, at what point does a designer standing there say, wait a minute, you're asking me to do this? They design a gate that says the work will set you free. And the engineers design a railhead to bring people in on cattle cars, and they'd be taken out on one side where they would be exposed, taken into gas chambers and exposed to Cyclone B being developed by E.G. Farben Chemical Works nearby. And then they would have some of their skin would be stripped, their gold would be removed from their mouths, their hair might be taken for stuffing of mattresses, and then their corpses would be taken and into the crematoria, where German engineers were calculating how to most effectively and efficiently stack the human corpse depending on body fat content so it would burn most efficiently. And if you came out on the other side of this car, you were taken to slave labor camp and you were used for slave labor by E.G. Farben Chemical Works. And all of the cosmetics that you are wearing in this room were tested in human eyes at Auschwitz. At what point does a designer say, I can't do this kind of work? Not only can I not do this kind of work, I can't even participate in this kind of work. Not only that, I can't even condone it. In fact, I have to rail against it. Wait a minute, I actually have to revolt against this. I have to go to war. I have to become a revolutionary. I got back to New York. We were designing Paul Stewart's men's store, and I looked at our specification, and I realized that without being able to do very much about it, I was designing a gas chamber. We're sitting in one right now. These fabrics that you sit on contain antimony, a carcinogenic heavy metal. Don't squirm. And I realized that if I looked at the first industrial revolution as a design assignment, it would have to look like this. And while I give it to you now, you're all the designers, I want you to reflect on this, and while I'm giving it to you, think about Birkenau, think about Auschwitz, think about design as intention. I would like you to design an industrial system for world culture that treats nature as its enemy, to be evaded or controlled, that measures prosperity by how much of your natural capital you can cut down, dig up, bury, burn, or otherwise destroy. Measures your productivity by how few people are working. Progress by your number of smokestacks, if you're especially proud to put your names on them. Destroys biological and cultural diversity at every turn with one-size-fits-all solutions. Requires thousands of complex regulations to keep you from killing each other too quickly. And while you're at it, produce a few things so highly toxic they'll require thousands of generations to maintain constant vigilance while living in terror. Can you do this for me? Welcome to this morning. It's time for a new design assignment. In 1991, I was commissioned by the city of Hanover, Germany, along with my firm and friends, to write the Hanover Principles, the same culture that created the worst of human intention. The Germans had gone to a very deeply dark place in the 40s, was asking for what would the best of human intention look like. And so we wrote these principles in 1991, 92, insist on the rights of humanity and nature to coexist. This is not, please hope that they will. Recognize interdependence, expand design considerations to recognize even distant effects, respect the relationships between spirit and matter. Now, the Germans tried to get rid of this one. It was number 8. And I said, wait a minute. All the native peoples who looked at this said there is only one principle. It's this one. The rest come from here. So why don't we make it number 5? And they said, no, you don't understand. We're trying to remove it. It's too fuzzy. I said, why don't we make it number 3? Do you see where we're going? Number 3, it's fine. You can stay number 3. Still there. But is this when I work in businesses, and I remember calling the chairman of Monsanto and saying we need a conference on the ethics of genetic engineering, and because there is no code of responsible care. And well, why does this matter? Why does the spirit-matter connection matter? Well, think about this from a business perspective. If you cross BT with plants, with soy and so on, what have you just done? You've crossed the animal kingdom with the plant kingdom, something God never tried to do. At what point is the world's largest market, Hindus, unable to eat American food? When can you no longer be a vegetarian? That's an interesting question. That's a business question. 6 weeks later, they started burning Monsanto crops in India. How about the Human Genome Project? Do you know that they put the human genome into swine to create medical sera for humans? That's very interesting. What happens to the pigs? Did you have human genome for breakfast this morning? Do you think somebody might want to ask you if you want to become a cannibal? Does it matter? Accept responsibility for the consequences of design. Create safe objects of long-term value. Don't tyrannize the future. Eliminate the concept of waste. I think this is the one that rang for most people. This is not minimize waste. This is not efficiency. Remember back, this is 1991. This is before Factor 4 and all that kind of stuff. This is sort of when eco-efficiency was just about to be launched at the Earth Summit. This is eliminate the entire concept of waste. Rely on natural energy flows. Nature doesn't mortgage the past or the future. Understand the limitations of design, be humble, and seek constant improvement by the sharing of knowledge. Let me show you some projects. We design with 3, thank you. If you want a copy of the book, just let us know. We're McDonough.com, and we'll send it to you. It's for insomniacs. It's a 70-page tract. Put you right out. I think they have some here, actually. Anyway, we use waste equals food, use current solar income, and respect diversity. Why are these important? Let me do the last 2 first. Respect diversity and use current solar income. Think of Einstein as a poet. Right? Now imagine the sun is energy, it's physics, and the earth is mass, it's chemistry. And the two come together at c², and guess what happens? Magic. We get biology, the single photosynthetic cell, our common ancestor. It becomes sentient, and it develops spiritual consciousness. Isn't that amazing? And then all heaven breaks loose on the planetary surface, And all of a sudden we have more and more species, more and more niches being created, occupied by more and more species, and it's fecund, and it grows and it grows and it grows, and growth is good. Now, ask a 6-year-old, is growth good? And what we realize is that the big debate between commerce and the environmentalists today is growth, no growth. What a ridiculous debate. And commerce is saying we have to have growth for the engine of commerce, and the environmentalists are saying growth is destroying the world. Well, isn't really the question, what do you want to grow? I mean, wouldn't we rather grow prosperity and not ignorance? Wouldn't we rather grow intelligence and not stupidity? Wouldn't we rather grow health and not sickness? What do we want to grow? Growth is good. See, in this context, asphalt is 2 words, assigning blame. The criteria we use are different than most people. We use cost, performance, aesthetics, the same one everybody uses. You know, can I afford it? Does it work? Do I like it? At architecture school, we obviously reverse this. But the next 3 we add are, is it ecologically intelligent? Is it fair? And is it fun? Now, what was interesting the other day for all you, San Francisco people here with the internet and so on, is the other day I was with Michael Dell, because Michael Dell's adopting our protocol for Dell computers, which is going to be quite interesting. And I was sitting there and I was reading him this, and I went, isn't that amazing? I just realized something. Ecological intelligence is life, justice is liberty, and fun is the pursuit of happiness. And he said, you and Jefferson are interesting people, but you forgot the most important thing. I said, really? What's that? Bandwidth. Okay, so if waste equals food, everything's a nutrient. If everything's a nutrient, it belongs in a metabolism. What are the metabolisms of the world? Well, there's the one of life itself, we call the biological one, and there's the technical one. And so we say designed to go into these cycles. So a biological product is something that you can consume. It goes back to soil, as Wes was saying. We've got to rebuild our soils. We've got to take these materials and port them back and rebuild our soils. It takes 10,000 years to make an inch of soil. Other products we call products of service. You want the service, not the ownership, this computer, this microphone. If I had a TV hiding behind this podium and I said I have an amazing object, provides incredible service, but before I tell you what it does, let me tell you what it is, and you tell me if you want this in your house. It's 4,360 chemicals, it's full of toxic heavy metals, and it has an explosive glass tube, and we think you ought to put it at eye level with your children and encourage them to play with it. Do you want this in your house? Why are we selling people hazardous waste? If what you want to do is watch TV, not own hazardous materials. So we call these products of service. You want to design them so they go back to the same industry from whence they came. I mean, the idea of designing for durability is insane at this point. If I took this computer and brought it up and said, listen, I got this computer I just bought. It's going to last me for 25 years. You would say, you are an idiot. What I want is the service of this until the new chips or whatever. This should be designed to go back and back and back forever instead of destroying the world. I just create jobs. And this is not efficiency. I mean, we've sort of gotten a lot of trouble in the environmental world because we're saying eco-efficiency is a dead end. Look at eco-efficiency. What does it mean as a design perspective? You wake up in the morning feeling 100% bad. You spend your day trying to feel better by being less bad, and your goal is 0. Can you imagine Thomas Jefferson putting that on his tombstone? And the problem with eco-efficiency is you run out of steam. Monsanto can reduce its toxic emissions by 90% over 5 years. That's very nice, but there's still 2 questions. What were you doing in the first place? And now that we're worried about endocrine disruption, it went from parts per million to parts per trillion. So while you reduced it by a factor of 10, it went up by factors of thousands. So now you have a new 100%, and you have this new Zeno's paradox that you're never going to get there. I could leave here and go north to Canada or south to Mexico. If I find myself going 100 miles an hour towards Canada, but I'm supposed to be going into Mexico, it's not going to help me to slow down to 20. You see, nature is not efficient. You don't look at a cherry tree in the spring and say, oh my God, how many blossoms does it take? I mean, can you imagine Mozart being efficient? I hit the piano with a 2x4, bang, got him, all at once. There's nothing about efficiency that humans delight in. Can you imagine an efficient Italian dinner, a little red pill and a glass of water? Okay. So what we want to do is celebrate the abundance of the natural world, but those cherry blossoms going back and become trees. We want to close our cycles. It's too bad the first industrial revolution was invented by northern Presbyterians. They have to bury everything, including their emotions. What we're looking at those are my people. That's okay. What we're looking at is the idea of celebration of abundance instead of the bemoaning of limits. Let's just imagine we're 10% sustaining and we want to go to be 100% sustaining. Now notice I'm not saying sustainable. When I won this award from Clinton at the White House, the press all came up because I was the only individual there and said, "Oh, Mr. Sustainable, what does it all mean?" And I felt like, you know, Mr. Natural, remember that? And I said, I'm not that interested in sustainability, really, because if it's just the edge between destruction and regeneration, if it's a kind of maintenance, is this exciting? You know, if I said to you, yeah, are you married? And you could say, yes. And I said, what's your relationship to your spouse like? And you said, sustainable. Who cares? I mean, what we're looking for is fecundity. We're looking for sex. We're looking for children. We're looking for blood. We're looking for things that move. So, is that a male thing? We move around, we move. Anyway, at least this way we have to imagine what 100% good looks like, which is different than just trying to keep the world going. The same old thing would be less bad. So this is eco-effectiveness. So here's the science part of the talk. The problem is we're using too much stuff over time. We see this tragedy. Everybody goes, oh my God, we're using too much stuff over time. So we have to use less stuff over time. Well, that's nice, except no business person in the world is trained to like this chart. And on top of that, it doesn't change the story, right? This says that the Mitsubishi make twice as many cardboard boxes out of the trees in Indonesia. Well, that's very nice, except does it change the story? It's still goodbye, Indonesia. Gregory Bateson, in Mind and Nature, when he was coining the term cybernetics, asked the computer a question. This is long before the web. This is when Hal is singing Daisy, Daisy. Remember that? And he says, tell me, computer, when do you think computers will begin to think like humans? And there's a long pause, and the computer says, that reminds me of a story. So what is our story? So we're saying, let's change time to stuff, stuff to intelligence, make the line itself time, and then watch this. Over time, we're using up too much stuff, but we're getting smarter and smarter and smarter and using less and less stuff because we're sequestering materials to human use in technical or biological cycles, and we can leave the rest of the world alone. What has happened is between capitalism and socialism, we have a social market economy, but any extreme position, ism, Nazism, sexism, is a dangerous thing. And does efficiency have any value? Ask a philosopher. Does it have any value? No, because an efficient Nazi is worse than an inefficient Nazi. Is efficiency good? Not if you're a Nazi. So what we're looking for is this effectiveness and saying, what we really want to do is the right thing. What is that? And if we were just in a social market economy, we realize that capitalists will destroy the world. They'll cut down the trees and forget the fish. Socialists will destroy the world because they'll yield a former USSR, as Alexei Yablokov, Russia's chief scientist, tells us, is now 16% uninhabitable. They call it ecocide. This would be the equivalent of putting a fence around Texas, which might be a good idea. I'm not political. It's their idea. Wasn't my idea. Anyway, what's been missing is this ecologism. You see, ecologism would be just as dangerous. If I said, you must go solar, what am I saying? Get your neighbors nervous because you're about to put ugly, heavy metal-laden blue rectangles on your roof, learn electrical engineering, take high-technology risk, negotiate with your local monopsony, and do something completely uneconomic. Go for it. And so what we're really looking for are things that bring things together where we find all three, the famous triad of sustainable development. So we've developed tools we use with our clients to run through this. This is a fractal tile, one of the design tools we use to change corporations. And the first question we ask is the bottom right corner. It's the economy corner of the economy corner. What's the question? Can I make it and sell it at a profit? Pure capitalism. And we tell our clients who are commercial, if the answer to that question is no, don't do it. And they all go, whew. Because they're in commerce, you see, they're not guardian. If they don't make profits, they don't exist. If they don't exist, we can't change them. Economy equity, what's the question? This is a question our client Nike deals with quite a bit. Our employees earning a living wage. Equity economy, same too. Equity first. Are men and women being paid the same for the same work? Equity first. Equity, nothing to do with ecology or economy. Are people treating each other with respect? This is where we find racism, sexism. Equity ecology, is it fair to expose our workers to cancer in the workplace? Is it fair to expose our children to phthalates and endocrine disruptors as they chew on dolls' heads. Ecology equity, is it fair to pollute the world? Ecology is waste equal food. And then ecology, economy, this is where we start to find effectiveness. Are we being productive? Are we actually making more than we're taking? If you start to think about it, we heard about it in this farming, we heard about things. This is the idea of being productive. We're designing a building for Oberlin College that's designed to make more energy than it needs to operate. It's a building like a tree. It pays back its embedded energy mortgage. And then we see economy, equity, ecology. This is eco-efficiency. This is natural capitalism, and so on. This is using nature as a human tool. Now, the problem I have with this is if you look at Le Corbusier in the 20s, he said a house is a machine for living in. Does that mean a church is a machine for praying in? And now we look at living machines, which is an astonishing idea, but as we use plants to sequester mercury, we still have to ask ourselves, are we using plants as a human tool instead of steel or harsh chemicals? I think the ultimate question is the native question. When do humans become tools of nature? In 1993, we were asked to design a fabric by Steelcase Corporation. We went to a mill and they said, well, listen, you guys, we know you're going to ask us what it's made out of. They said, how about cotton and PET? We said, does that make sense? Cotton is responsible for 23% of the world's pesticide use. It causes hydrological disasters and has never been associated with social fairness. PET is full of antioxidants, UV stabilizers, plasticizers, and antimony residues from catalytic reactions. Can it go back to soil? No. Can it go back to industry? No. So what if we designed first an organic fabric? We went to a mill in Switzerland. They said, we're glad you're here because yesterday the trimmings of our bolts of cloth were declared hazardous material by the Swiss government. We can no longer bury or burn it in Switzerland. We have to ship it to Spain. And you realize you've hit the wall of the first industrial revolution when your trimming is declared hazardous waste, but your product can be sold. And so we said the filters of the future will be in our heads, not on the ends of pipes. And we went to 60 chemical companies and said, who wants to get rid of cancer, birth defects, genetic mutations, and disruption of our hormonal systems? And they all said no. So we went to Ciba-Geigy. The chairman, Alex Crower, said, you're right, and I'm letting you in. And the joke in Basel was that they finally had let the hen into the fox house. And we looked at 8,000 chemicals with these intellectual filters. We studied health hazards, allergies, bioaccumulations, worm toxicities, heavy metal content, persistence. 3M removed Scotchgard. Once we saw that our whales were stain-proof, we realized this was not essential. What we realized is that they have to study our production processes. We have to know whether we're doing this or that. We have to be completely defined. And with those intellectual filters, we had to eliminate 7,962. Chemicals. We were left with 38. We did the entire fabric line with 38. It's won 3 gold medals. It's just been bought by the companies that does the aircraft seating. Because of this fabric is so safe you can eat it. If you have, thanks. If you have a fiber deficiency, you can eat your chair. But what happened is quite delightful. When the Swiss inspectors came to the mill to test the water coming out, they thought their equipment had broken. Because what we were now doing is taking the trimmings and making them mulch for the local garden club. In this case, waste equals food, strawberries. And what happened is that the water coming out of the mill was as clean as or cleaner than the water coming in, which was Swiss drinking water. And I don't know how many of you have been in a textile mill, but if you can imagine being thirsty with an empty glass, and that's Swiss drinking water, and that's a dye vat, and a mordant bath, and a rinse, and a fire retardant, and you'd rather drink that. This means you can turn the pipe around. If you turn the pipe around because it's even cleaner, then guess what? When the inspectors come, there's nothing to inspect. Guess what? There's no regulations. This product is completely unregulated. There is nothing to regulate because we're not trying to kill anybody anymore. Can I keep going here? Am I right? I'm going to keep going. All right. We're applying this to the carpet industry. Yesterday, one of the largest carpet companies in the country has joined some other companies that have adopted our protocol. Carpets will become products of service. When you buy a carpet, what you want is acoustics, comfort and so on, but the product should be designed to go back to the industry forever, and that's what's being done. We're doing work with Nike. We're postulating that the future of a shoe should be that the soles would abrade, and instead of being terrifying for worms, it would be healthful, and the uppers are would be new polyesters that are infinitely recyclable. We're designing shower gels that make the fish happy when it hits the water. We're looking at the automobiles and studying their flows to understand how many materials are going through the actual recycling, which is really downcycling. And we're positing cars that become cars again forever. We're able to issue environmental statements which track every molecule moving through a company and show how we're using the tool to create constant improvement. For buildings, we've designed factories for Herman Miller at one Business Week's Design for Business Award, the best building in America for business. Performance is up 24%, same number of people. They're delivering $30 million to the bottom line every 6 months. The building cost $15 million to make. We gave everybody fresh air and daylight. They wear Aloha shirts and make furniture, and performance is up. Go figure. For the Gap and San Bruno, we designed their corporate campus, and we said, wouldn't it be wonderful if the roof was an ancient landscape of grasses of this area and the Quercus agrifolia? So we won the competition with a building where if the birds were flying overhead, they would look down and say, oh, it's our people. The roof undulates so that the people inside feel like they're working under a cloud all day. We use nighttime air to pre-cool the building so that everybody can use 100% fresh air and daylight all day long. So it's not efficient building. See, we just won an award from PG&E as one of the most efficient buildings in California, but we never designed it to be efficient. The building it was competing against was a building that was designed to minimize daylight and minimize fresh air. This is 100% daylight, 100% fresh air. Why are we designing these buildings? For the building or for the people? Sustainably harvested sycamore from the Menominee tribe of Wisconsin. This is a roof. For Nike, we've done a new corporate campus. It's the largest geothermal system in Holland. It's designed for photovoltaics and grass roofs. It recirculates its water. We put the running track over the front door because it's Nike. Just do it. Here's your last design assignment, and then I have to get pulled off by a crook. For David Orr, we said, here's your last design assignment. Think of the most high-tech building you've ever imagined. Now imagine this. Design a building that makes oxygen, sequesters carbon, fixes nitrogen, distills water, accrues solar energy as fuel, makes complex sugars and food, creates microclimates, builds soil, changes with the seasons, and self-replicates. Go for it. This is a building that makes more energy than it needs to operate, and the sewage is treated in a living machine designed by John Todd at the entrance to the auditorium. We're doing the same kind of thing for Woods Hole Research Center, the people tracking global warming, a building made out of silicon carbohydrate for the University of Hawaii, a new center for sustainable future for Hawaii. We're doing a new town for the utility of northern Indiana where we're positing new hydrologic systems, new transportation systems that divert to people. This is a waste treatment plant. We're bringing the elders and the children back together, the healthcare and a botanical garden that does the town's laundry. And the last I'll show you is our most recent project approved by the board of Ford Motor Company last week. We're redesigning the River Rouge. It's a $2 billion project, 20 years. The joke in Dearborn is that this is a color photograph. This is Charles Sheeler's famous image of the Rouge, sold to Christie's for $600,000 a few months ago. First vertically integrated industrial facility in the world. Coal and iron ore come in at one end, cars come out the other. We're redoing it based on a new vision for the chairman, Henry Ford's great-grandson, to transform this vision of human industry, represented here by Diego Rivera's astonishing murals at the Detroit Art Institute, to a new vision of the future. After November 3rd, I'll be able to show pictures of it, but the basic strategy is to go back 7 generations and take a look at the site and see where we started. Take a look at it when Henry Ford got there. Take a look at it today. And ask ourselves, what does the next 7 generations of this site look like? And over time, the factory itself gets integrated into the ecology of the system, which gets reconnected, because as any biologist will tell you, the surest way to heal an ecosystem that is in ill health is to connect it to more of itself. Humans as tools of nature. This idea of humans making smaller footprints is ridiculous. We need bigger footprints, but we should leave behind wetlands. So I have to close. At the end, I think what we can do now is delight in the separate thing that makes us human. We can celebrate the abundance of the natural world. We can celebrate our children instead of bemoan their coming. We can study the fact that the thing that makes us special is we have intentionality, we have creativity, and we have hope, and that we celebrate the wonders of nature and allow our children's children to celebrate life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, free from the intergenerational remote tyranny that is us and bad design. Thank you very much.